5 stories, 5 different spots in the home, one through line. Everything you've been told about AI and creativity is missing the most important part, the human being behind it. This is Foundations, Series 1, about the AI Lab. So stay with me. There's something nobody in the AI conversation is talking about or saying out loud. And I think it's the real reason most creative professionals are stuck. It's not the tools. It's not the learning curve. Shoot, it's not even the time it takes to figure this stuff out. It's the feeling that everything you've spent 10, 20, 30 years building, your eye, your instincts, your taste, your craft, might suddenly not matter anymore. That feeling has a name. It's called an identity threat. And it's one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. When what we do becomes who we are, and then something comes along that threatens to do it faster, cheaper, and without us. We don't just resist the technology, we resist ourselves trying to use it. And that's not a tech problem. That's a human problem. And human problems need human solutions. My name is Brian Sykes, and I've been working at the intersection of creative practice and AI since before most people knew there was even an intersection. What I've learned across 8 books, thousands of students, and more than 2 decades in this industry is this. AI doesn't replace your creative instincts. It gives them more room to move. Not to go faster, but to go further, to test more directions, to spend less time on the path and more time on the destination. That's a human value. And it's one most people in the AI conversation simply aren't talking about. My name is Brian Sykes. This is the AI Lab. And if that resonates, stay with me, because we're just getting started. Can I tell you something about adults that nobody says in the AI conversations? We are harder to teach than children. Not because we're less intelligent, but because we're more fixed. See, children are malleable. They haven't decided yet who they are and what they're capable of. They try things, they fail publicly, they get up and they try again. Failure, it's just data. But somewhere as we move into adulthood, we start locking things down. We have an experience, we interpret it, we make a decision about what it means about us, and then we file it away as a fact. Have you heard the statements, "I'm just not good with technology. I'm not that kind of person. I could never do that." Those aren't necessarily true statements. They're protection mechanisms. They're places where we stopped growing and put up a fence so we never have to feel that way again. And here's what AI does to every single one of those fences. It walks straight up to them because AI is new. Nobody has done this before. Nobody is already good at it. The playing field is genuinely level, and that should feel liberating, but it doesn't. Because when you're standing in front of something new, in public, in a professional context, every story you've ever told about your own limitations shows up at once. So what if I fumble this? What if everyone sees that I didn't know what I'm doing? What if this confirms everything I've been afraid was true about me? That's not resistance to AI. That's a human protecting themselves the only way they know how. I've spent years watching creative professionals, brilliant, experienced, talented people, freeze in front of new technology. Not because they couldn't learn it, but because the act of not knowing felt like proof of something they'd been afraid of their whole career. Here's what I want you to hear. The fence isn't you. It's a decision you made a long time ago, probably from an experience that had nothing to do with AI or technology or even your creative ability. But decisions can be revisited. Here's what the human element is about. Not learning AI faster. It's about learning yourself better. So the tools stop feeling like a threat and start feeling like what they actually are. See, the fence was never the boundary of what you're capable of. It was just where you stopped. We can start again from there. So stay with me, because next I want to tell you about 2022, before any of this existed, and what it felt like to lead people from a space nobody had mapped yet. This is Brian Sykes of the AI Lab. Before I tell you about AI, I need to tell you about my dad. He was a loom fixer, third shift, Cone Mills, Hillsborough, North Carolina, the 1970s. He fixed the machines that made the cloth, and that was his world. But somewhere in there, he got a vision. Before personal computing was a thing, before most people had even seen one, my dad bought a computer in 1977. Amber screen, clunky keyboard, and he started taking classes at the local college on his GI Bill. Fortran, COBOL, BASIC, everything they offered. And by the time I was 7 years old, my father had a white-collar job as a programmer, working indirectly with NASA out of the Research Triangle Park through Sperry Rand. Nobody around him saw it coming. He just saw it. So I grew up with computers in the living room, central to home, not hidden away. And I learned on them before I understood that I was learning. And something got passed down in that. Not the technical knowledge so much, but the instinct. The ability to look at something rough and early and incomplete and feel what it could become. So fast forward to 2020. COVID took 80% of my business. The branding agency that I had spent years building was gutted. And in that space, that uncomfortable, uncertain space, I started seeing conversations appear. Small ones at first, in corners of the internet that most people weren't looking at, about AI. In 2021, I came across an image. It was rough, early. It looked like an impressionist painting of a boy in blue. The kind of thing most people would have scrolled past because it wasn't great. But I stopped because I felt something. Potential. Possibility. The same two words my father must have felt staring at the amber screen in 1977. See, I'd seen this moment before, not AI specifically, but the shape of the moment, the way desktop publishing looked before it changed everything, the way the internet looked before it impacted the world. This was going to be big and larger than all of those before. And it wasn't just going to touch images. It was going to touch everything. So I went in. Not because I had a plan, and not because I knew what I was doing, because I couldn't look away. In September 2022, before ChatGPT existed, before Claude, before Gemini, before Midjourney had found its way out of Discord, before AI was part of the normal creative conversation, I published the first book on generative AI image prompting. There was no category, no curriculum, no map, and it felt like leading people into a cave without lights, trying to make sense of a space as I moved through it. The conversation online was either early excitement or calls for creative crucifixion. There wasn't a middle ground yet. I posted every day for 18 months and grew a LinkedIn community from less than 100 to over 35,000. That was the AICC. Not because I had all the answers, but because I was willing to go first and keep going. That instinct, that seeing, it's what the AI Lab is built on. Not just the tools and not just the frameworks. The belief that the people in the space who will matter most are the ones who learn to see potential before it was obvious. That might be you. Stay with me, because next I want to talk about what actually happens inside a person when they stop resisting AI and start directing it. This is Brian Sykes, AI Lab. The shift. There's a moment. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a certificate. But if you've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the moment you stop reacting to AI and start directing it. Mine started long before AI was a thing. I was a young guy doing weekend side hustle work, helping a friend named Roger Smith paint someone's house. I misunderstood Roger's instructions and inadvertently made a mistake. So Roger looked at it, looked at me, and lets me know I flubbed. So I braced for it. But he said something I've never forgotten. That's my bad. I wasn't clear in explaining what I needed you to do. So I totally understand how what I said made you think that was right. That's completely my fault. Okay, I was stunned. Not because he let me off the hook, but because he took responsibility for the error. See, I had followed what I understood him to say. The failure wasn't execution, it was communication. That one moment changed how I led people, how I ran my agency, even how I raised my kids. If you are not clear in what you communicate, you cannot hold someone accountable for getting it wrong. Clarity and communication became the foundation of everything. It's funny, my degree was communications, and yet this was something I learned later. So when I started working with generative AI in 2021, that's exactly where I started. Not with prompting tricks, not with hacks, but with the same principle I learned painting a house with Roger Smith. Be clear. Express precisely what you want. Own the outcome. Because the AI, like any creative working beneath the director, will follow what it understands you to mean. If the output is wrong, the first question isn't, what did the AI do? It's, what did I communicate? That is creative directing. And it's what I brought to every course, every book, every intensive from the very beginning. Jordan Wilson had me on his Everyday AI podcast to talk about my take on AI back in 2023.
Most professionals are not at the mercy of something that just gives them something. They're looking for a specific look, a specific result. And so prompting becomes still at the front and center of that because we're trying to drive it to where we want it to go. I still think there's a conversation that must be had with the computer to direct it to get what you're after.
And in October 2023, an eternity ago in AI years, Tom Johnson, a senior technical writer at Google, the company building Gemini, Nano Banana, Veo, published a full research article and cited that framework as a cornerstone of how he and other creatives should think about working with AI. You can see both of them here on the screen. Me, a branding guy from North Carolina, cited by someone inside the machine. Not because I had the best tools, not because I was the fastest. It was because I started with a principle that had nothing to do with AI and everything to do with being human. My name is Brian Sykes. This is the AI Lab. And we're just getting started. The studio. It was October 2023, and I had just launched something I'd been building in my head for a long time. AI Lab Level 1, a 3-month course for creative professionals. It was a beta, a first attempt, built in real time with real people in a space that had no map yet. So 4 people signed up. Martin McCusker, a creative director with 20 years in the industry, already using AI. He came in prolific. Our first project was a smartwatch concept set in the 1830s. He generated over 600 images. 600 watches. Denise Lasky, 25 years in pharma marketing, a decade freelancing. She found the course on LinkedIn and showed up wanting to understand where the world was heading. Andre Hoffman, nearly 30 years in marketing, branding, and design. Zurich, Switzerland. Methodical, precise. He read every brief twice. And then there was Johnny. Johnny came from architecture school, moved into sales, got deep in marketing, had been experimenting with AI and mental health apps, building bots that asked people how their day was going. Not a traditional creative professional by any definition. Same course, same brief, same framework. And here's what happened. By the second project, Martin had transformed. His own words, I fell back onto my roots as a creative, the processes I had already learned over my career. I started to utilize AI as a tool for specific functions, integrating it into my process, not me integrating into AI. That reversal he described, not me integrating into AI, that's the whole thing. That's the Roger Smith principle applied to a machine. Be clear, know what you want, and own the output. Denise hit a wall on the watch project. Midjourney simply wouldn't give her the open face design that she needed. Hundreds of attempts, nothing. And then, the shift. She stepped back, tried a different tool, and within 2 prompts got exactly what she had been chasing. That's not a lucky accident. That's a director who refused to be limited by one actor. Andre kept saying the same thing every time I asked him about what clicked. It's the human factor, the creative direction from us. 30 years in the industry, and he recognized it immediately. And Johnny, who had never professionally designed anything, described what it felt like to tell a story first, build his personas, understand his audience, and then walk into the tools with intention. As long as you're deliberate, the way Brian taught us, and you know how to speak the language, you can bend them to your will. He said working with AI felt like having a design studio in his hands. Not because the tools were magic, because he knew what he was trying to say before he opened them. That's the lesson. AI is not magic dust you sprinkle on a project and hope for the best. It's a creative studio, full of capability, full of potential, waiting for a director who knows the brief. Your 20 years of knowing what's wrong before you can explain why, that's not obsolete. That's actually the most important thing in the room. My name is Brian Sykes. This is the AI Lab, and we're just getting started. Next is the director's chair. Foundations established why the human element matters. Series 2 goes practical. What does it actually look like to create a direct AI across real workflows, real tools, real briefs? 5 more episodes coming up next.